This happened a few years back, but every time I drive at night, it just replays in my mind. I was coming back from my friend's place. It was around 2 a.m. or something. He lives in a rural area with lots of winding roads and not many houses around. Anyway, I was driving home, just listening to some music, trying to stay awake. The road was pretty empty, which was usual for that hour. Out of nowhere, my car starts making this weird noise like something was dragging underneath. I thought I might have hit something, so I slowed down, looking for a place to pull over and check. The only light I had was from my headlights and the occasional street lamp, which wasn't much. Finally, I found a small clearing on the side of the road and stopped. I got out, used my phone's flashlight to see under the car, but I didn't see anything. That's when the silence of the night hit me. It was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just my car acting up and it might be fine until I get home. As I was about to get back into the driver's seat, I heard what sounded like footsteps coming from the woods nearby. I froze, thinking it might be an animal, but it sounded too heavy for that. I called out, asking if anyone was there. No answer. My mind started racing with all kinds of thoughts. Why would someone be out here in the middle of the night? I quickly got back into my car, locked the doors, and tried to start it. It took a few tries, which made my heart race even more, but finally it roared to life. I didn't waste any time and just sped out of there. As I looked back in my rearview mirror, I swear I saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods, just watching me leave. I don't know who or what it was, and I didn't stop to find out. I drove home as fast as I could, constantly checking my mirrors to make sure I wasn't being followed. I got home safe, thankfully, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched for weeks. I avoid driving at night whenever I can now, especially on those rural roads. There's something about the unknown that's very terrifying than any story. People always talk about seeing things, but the thought of someone or something just silently watching from the shadows gives me chills to this day. I used to be one of those people who enjoyed long drives to clear my head, especially after a long day at work. I was driving down this secluded stretch of highway that skirts around the city, where it's just you, the road, and fields as far as the eye can see. It's usually quiet, save for the occasional passing car. That night, though, it was different. I noticed a car in my rearview mirror that seemed to be maintaining the exact distance behind me, not trying to overtake, but definitely following. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence, but after several turns and even a completely unnecessary detour, it was clear. I was being followed. Trying to keep my cool, I figured if I could make it to a more populated area, whoever this was might back off. Just as I started to accelerate, my car lit up like a Christmas tree. Dashboard warnings, lights, everything. My heart sank. Of all the times for car trouble, this was the worst. The car behind me sped up, pulling up alongside me, and that's when I saw them. Masked figures in the car, glaring right at me. Panic set in. I did the only thing I could think of. Push my car as far as it would go. Warnings be damned. The other car kept pace, and then, out of nowhere, they tried to run me off the road. I swerved, narrowly avoiding a collision, my heart pounding out of my chest. Up ahead, I saw the lights of a gas station. Salvation. I pulled in, nearly hitting the fuel pumps in my haste. The other car didn't follow me into the light. Instead, it paused at the entrance of the lot, lingered for a moment, and then sped off into the night. Shaking, I got out of my car and ran inside, where I called the police. The officers arrived quickly and took my statement. They patrolled the area but found no sign of the car or its occupants. They told me there had been similar incidents reported recently, possibly a gang initiation or some sick thrill chase. I was just lucky to have escaped unscathed.
This is something I haven't shared with a lot of people because honestly it still scares me. It happened when I was driving back from a late shift. I've always preferred working nights. The roads are quieter and I like the calm. But after this night, my whole perspective changed. I was on the usual route home, a stretch of highway that cuts through some dense woods, when I noticed a car behind me. It wasn't unusual to see other cars, even at that hour, but this one was different. It was driving erratically, speeding up and then slowing down, never overtaking me but always keeping a close distance. I tried not to think much of it, assuming the driver was just tired or something. But then, the car started getting more aggressive, flashing its lights, honking, and at one point, it even bumped into my rear bumper. My heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. I thought about pulling over, but something told me that would be a bad idea. So I sped up, hoping to find a police station or at least a 24/7 gas station where there would be other people around. The car kept up, no matter how fast I went. That's when I saw it, a roadblock up ahead, not official but a few vehicles parked across the road and people standing beside them. It was like something out of a movie, a setup for an ambush. Panic set in. I knew if I stopped, I'd be at their mercy, whoever they were. In a split-second decision, I swerved onto a smaller road that led into the woods, my heart pounding as I navigated the dark, unfamiliar path. The car followed for a while but eventually fell behind. I didn't stop driving until I reached a town, pulling into a brightly lit gas station and calling the police. The officers took my statement and escorted me home, but they couldn't find any sign of the car or the roadblock when they went back to check. It was like the people knew the area well enough to disappear without a trace. I was left with a damaged car, a racing heart, and a newfound fear of driving alone at night. I later found out there had been reports of carjackings in the area, with criminals using tactics like fake roadblocks to stop unsuspecting drivers. I was lucky to escape. To this day, I avoid driving at night whenever possible, and I can't help but keep an eye on the rearview mirror, wondering if I'll ever encounter something like that again.
I've got a story that still messes with me to this day. Happened a couple of summers ago. I was on a road trip with a couple of friends, heading through some back roads to reach this secluded beach spot we heard was like paradise. It was my turn to drive, and we were in this part of the country that was just miles and miles of farmland and forests. Barely any signs of life. So it's getting late, and the GPS starts acting up, rerouting us every 2 minutes. We're joking about being in some horror movie setup because, that's what you do to keep the vibes light. The sun sets completely and it's pitch black outside, save for our headlights. Suddenly the car starts sputtering and then, just like that, we're dead on the road. Great, right? We're in the middle of nowhere and our phones have no service. Classic. We figured we'd have to spend the night in the car until we can get someone to pass by in the morning. But after about an hour, we see headlights coming down the road. We start waving like maniacs, hoping they'll stop. This old pickup truck pulls up, and this guy, about in his 60s, offers to help us. He says there's a small town about 20 miles back the way he came, and he can tow us there. We're relieved, thanking our lucky stars, and agree. As we're towing, something feels off. The road doesn't look familiar at all, and it's taking way longer than it should. We start seeing these weird handmade signs in the trees, symbols and stuff, not something you'd find on a normal road. My friend jokes about us being part of some cult sacrifice now. We laugh it off, but we're all uneasy. Finally, we get to this town, if you can even call it that. It's more like a collection of rundown houses and a single, dimly lit gas station. The guy drops our car off at what looks like a mechanic shop next to the station and tells us we can stay in the room above the shop for the night, and someone will look at the car in the morning. We're sketched out, but too tired to argue. The room's creepy, with old furniture and photos that feel like they're watching us. We lock the door and try to get some sleep, taking turns staying awake. In the middle of the night, we hear footsteps outside and whispers. We're freaking out, too scared to even look out the window. It lasts for what feels like hours until it suddenly stops. Morning comes, and we go down to find our car perfectly fine, like nothing was ever wrong with it. The mechanic, a different guy, acts like he doesn't know what we're talking about when we mention the old man. We didn't stick around to ask more questions. We paid for the repairs, got in the car, and got out of there as fast as we could. We never found that town again on any map. It's like it didn't exist. We still talk about it sometimes, trying to make sense of it, but maybe some things are better left unexplained. It was supposed to be a simple overnight drive. I had made the trip a dozen times before, a straight shot over the mountains to the next state where my family lived. But this time I decided to leave later than usual to avoid traffic, hitting the road just past midnight. The roads were emptier, the night darker and quieter than I'd ever seen it. An hour into the drive, I was winding my way up the mountain roads, the dense forests on either side like walls closing in. That's when I noticed a car trailing me. Not close enough to be alarming, but consistent. Every turn I made, it was there. I told myself it was just another traveler, perhaps finding comfort in not being alone on this desolate road. But then, the car started getting closer, its headlights a pair of glaring eyes in my rearview mirror. I sped up, uneasy, the sense of unease turning into fear. The car matched my speed, its presence now unmistakably threatening. Suddenly it surged forward, slamming into the back of my car. I fought to keep control, my heart racing, panic setting in. I had no signal on my phone, no way to call for help. The car hit me again, harder this time, and I realized this wasn't an accident. I was being targeted. In a desperate bid for escape, I took the next turn off the highway, a narrow road that led deeper into the forest. The car followed, relentless. The road was rough, twisting, turning, and in the darkness, I could barely see what was ahead. I pushed my car as fast as it dared to go, the other vehicle still on my tail, until, out of nowhere, the road ended. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop just inches from a steep drop. My pursuer wasn't so lucky. Unable to stop in time, their car crashed into mine, the momentum sending it over the edge. I heard the crash as it went down, a sound that echoed in the still night. Shaken, I sat there for what felt like hours, until the first light of dawn. When I finally mustered the courage to check, there was no sign of the other car, just the vast, unforgiving drop. I drove home in the early morning light, the events of the night playing over and over in my mind. The police later told me they found the wrecked car, but it was empty. No trace of the driver, no clue as to why they had chased me with such deadly intent. The only evidence of the night's terror was the damage to my car and the nightmares that followed. To this day, I avoid driving at night, especially alone. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling content. For another hair-raising tale, check out our suggested video. And if you're hungry for more eerie encounters, dive into our playlist featuring similar chilling narratives.